Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. The legacy of Nelson Mandela and the exploitation of it, that is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. Nearly 100 world leaders are in South Africa memorializing the late Nelson Mandela. The former president of South Africa died last week at age 95 and is a symbol of freedom all over the world. Up until 1994, South Africa was run by a racist government that enforced laws keeping the majority of its citizens, black people, down. That was called apartheid. Nelson Mandela led the fight for civil rights in his country, and the white apartheid government put him in prison for 27 years. Think about that, 27 years for trying to get equality for all South Africans. After the apartheid government collapsed, Mr. Mandela rose up to lead his nation, but with the legacy of oppression, it was a very difficult task. I was in South Africa in 1995 when that country won the World Rugby Championship. It was a great moment. Mr. Mandela was in the stands, and South Africans were deliriously happy. I enjoyed my time in that country, but the poverty was unbelievable and remains so today. As a young man, Nelson Mandela had Marxist leanings and dealt closely with communists. Check out a recent article in The Economist magazine if you want specifics on that. Anyone who knows anything about South Africa understands Mr. Mandela's philosophy. Enter the far-left MSNBC network and Al Sharpton. As we have demonstrated in the past, Sharpton is a dishonest purveyor of information, a man who could not care less about reporting what's true. Last Friday, using Nelson Mandela as cover, Sharpton attacked me.
He said about Nelson Mandela last night on Fox.
95 years old.
Yeah.
Nelson Mandela, I spent some time in South Africa. He was a communist, this man.
Yeah.
He was a communist, all right?
This is not in the 80s.
But don't you wonder where it was in South Africa? It wasn't like he was hanging out in Soweto, that Bill O'Reilly, I'm quite certain.
Well, here I am in Soweto, where I did spend some time. That woman, Karen Finney, a former spokesperson for the DNC, obviously made a mistake. So I am expecting a letter of apology from Ms. Finney by tomorrow. If she is honest, she'll send it over. If she is like Sharpton and not honest, she will not, and I'll let you know what happens tomorrow evening. As for Sharpton, he is a flat-out deceiver. Here's what I actually said about Mr. Mandela. 95 years old. Yeah. Nelson Mandela, I spent some time in South Africa. He was a communist, this man.
Yeah.
He was a communist. All right? But he was a great man. What he did for his people was stunning. The sacrifices that he made. He could have repudiated it and got out of that prison. He wouldn't do it. So you can see that Sharpton cut out all of the context, as he has done many times before. Now, any other commentator on national TV would have been fired for doing that. But NBC seems to be afraid of Sharpton. The thing is, Sharpton uses the occasion of Nelson Mandela's death to dishonestly attack people he doesn't like. They don't come lower. Now, President Obama made a good speech today, but he, like many other Americans, was a bit confused that Cuban human rights violator Raul Castro actually spoke at the memorial.
There are too many people who happily embrace Madiba's legacy of racial reconciliation, but passionately resist even modest reforms that would challenge chronic poverty and growing inequality. There are too many leaders who claim solidarity with Madiba's struggle for freedom, but do not tolerate dissent from their own people.
Madiba, the tribal name of Nelson Mandela. President Obama is correct. There are phonies all over the place, saying one thing but actually oppressing the oppressed by their actions. Raul Castro, certainly an example of that. There comes a point when good people have to honor other good people, even when they disagree with their philosophy, and that was the point I was making about Nelson Mandela. There also comes a point when good people have to walk away from bad people who exploit situations for their own gain. And I think you all know who I'm talking about. And that's a memo. Now for the top story tonight. Reaction joining us from Miami, Reverend Raphael Warnock, the senior pastor of the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. That was Martin Luther King's church. And from Washington, Bishop Harry Jackson, the senior pastor of Hope Christian Church in Maryland. Bishop Jackson, what are your thoughts tonight on all this?
Well, Mandela really had a transformation while he was in prison.
When he left Robben Island, he said, "I leave behind anger, guilt, and revenge." And his life is a story of forgiveness. And I believe that part of the story is true. And he should be honored as a transformational leader who was transformed, who brought transformation and healed the nation.
Do you think I should forgive Sharpton for what he's doing?
I do believe that Sharpton's motives sometimes are questionable. But yes, I think that ultimately you should point out the truth. And I don't think he's going to change. He's seeing things through a grid of unforgiveness, perhaps, and I think that's a shame.
All right. Reverend Warnock, how do you see the day in perspective?
Thank you so much, Bill. Good to be here with you. Today was a great celebration of a great man whose celebration was one born of suffering and deep sorrow. I am just inspired by the legacy of Nelson Mandela. I think the way in which he pitched a tent large enough to bring together people who are not normally in the same room is indicative of how we ought to engage one another on these issues. I think that the question for Nelson Mandela and those who worked with him was, how do we set our people free? That was his question. It was a question that was wrestled and engaged in the United States of America within the context of the Cold War. And I think, quite honestly, in many ways, we were so obsessed with these kinds of ideological debates that we did not deal with the basic question of human dignity and human freedom. I think if his life and if his struggle demonstrates anything, it demonstrates that when we are obsessed with these kinds of ideological questions, and ideology has its role, sometimes we end up on the wrong side of history.
You know, I agree with that.
For too long.
I agree with that.
I'm much more disturbed by how long we took to align ourselves with Nelson Mandela and those who struggled with him than I am by whoever chose to ally themselves with it.
It was the communist beef, Reverend, that held a lot of people back in America, and they shouldn't have. It shouldn't have, you know. But what I picked up from Soweto was interesting. That woman said, "Oh, O'Reilly never go to Soweto." That's exactly the reason I went to South Africa, was to go there. It was an unbelievable spirit, Bishop. I don't know if you've been over there or not. It's the most, it's the poorest place you can imagine. You see the porta potty behind me. I mean, they don't have plumbing or electricity there. But the spirit of these children and the spirit of the people there, it is a dangerous place. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. But the humanness of it all was just stunning. Go ahead, Bishop.
Bill, I think one important thing, I've taken 20 trips to South Africa, planted 5 churches there. I have outreach to the poor in South Africa. What happened with my first trip in '95 is I'm preaching. A man is watching me, white man, 50s. He begins to tear up, he cries. After the service, he said to me, "They told me that you people had no spirit. They told me that you weren't really," basically he was saying, human. And I believe that the spiritual answer of personal transformation is the story of the day, Bill. And I think that this is a problem even with America now, is very often guys like Sharpton carry a grudge. They want to keep digging up the past. It's time for us to energize our discussions.
Yeah, I agree. It's time for us to really see strip it all away and see the humanness of it. Now, the final thing, Reverend,
the question of personal transformation is tested by one's commitment to what Dr. King called the beloved community. The Dutch Reformed Church in South Africa was committed to personal salvation, as it is often construed by religious folk, but it did not play itself out very well in terms of their theology. Their theology embraced the heretical doctrine of apartheid. That was the problem in South Africa.
But what I want everybody to get across on this day, because you know how history is taught in America now, gentlemen. It's not taught, particularly about countries like South Africa. Nelson Mandela, he could have gotten out of that prison. All he had to do was tell that apartheid government, you know what, you're not so bad. I'll work with you. I'll do this. He wouldn't do it. 27 years. Just think about that. And no matter what else the man did in his whole life, no matter what he believed in, what he didn't believe in, what he accomplished, what he didn't accomplish, just that sacrifice for his people elevates him right up here. Gentlemen, thanks very much. We really appreciate it. Next on the Rundown, Crowley and Combs. Continuing now with our lead story, the legacy of Nelson Mandela. In addition to President Obama, former Presidents Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Jimmy Carter, all attended the memorial service today in Johannesburg. America has been very respectful toward Nelson Mandela, as it should be. With us now to analyze, Monica Crowley and Alan Combs. So, Combs, you know, you're about as far left as they come.
Oh, way out there. Man,
I think
I'm a
so.
liberal loon.
Well, all right. I mean, at least, true confessions.
I'll just say it for you.
True confessions tonight.
That's what you think.
But I mean, you're a committed leftist. Okay. And I've known you for more than 17 years, and I've never seen you do anything approaching what Al Sharpton does, not only to me, but on a regular basis, cutting, you know,
he
this
did
stuff
not have your full statement. Clearly, you were praising Mandela.
Right.
I'm not sure why you chose that moment to call him a communist. But
because you should be sure, because you knew that we were doing the segment, and the discussion was you got to put ideology aside. Right. Okay, I was talking to Dennis Kucinich. You got to put it aside sometimes. Yeah. A man can be a hero in a lot of different circumstances.
Right. So that context was lost.
Now you're sure why I said it.
No, but the context was lost because you were praising him. You were not knocking him.
That's right.
Or name calling.
So Sharpton then, in taking Nelson Mandela's death, and uses it dishonestly to attack someone he doesn't like. Despicable? Is that too strong a word?
Yeah, it's not right. But did he edit the tape? I wonder if he even knew everything you said.
He knew.
A producer could have done it. An editor could have done it. I don't know if he knew everything you said.
That's what NBC said the last time, the last 8 times they did this.
Yeah, I mean, they do this repeatedly. Al Sharpton has done this repeatedly. Al Sharpton has been on this program. You guys have had very dynamic back and forth conversations.
I tried with him.
Right.
I did.
He knew to take it out of context. He took it out of context. He has facts wrong. He's completely inaccurate. He used Nelson Mandela's death as a spear to try to get to you.
Right. And that, despicable, is that too strong a word?
Yeah, I mean, it's
exploiting the death of this great man.
Dishonest, but you know what? This is what the left does. Why we expect anything different from
As I said to Combs, I never saw Combs do anything like that, and we never saw Kucinich do anything like that.
These are exceptions to the rule.
I disagree with you. I don't think the left.
This is routine for them.
No, I don't think the left does that generally. I don't think that's an accurate statement.
I think this is
there are militant leftists that do it, but the deal is this. CBS suspends Lara Logan for 60 minutes, okay, because of the Benghazi report that wasn't, and, you know, they vetted it, they didn't vet it enough. And they brought in a man who wasn't there. He said he was at the shootout. He wasn't. So Lara Logan gets suspended by CBS News, right? I feel bad for Lara Logan. I think she's a brave woman and a good correspondent.
They should never suspended Dan Rather. He should have been suspended.
Well, that's another story.
Yeah.
But NBC hires a guy like this, puts him on the air every single day, knowing he does this all the time. We've documented it here. I don't get it, Holmes. I don't get it. Look, Bashir gets fired. Baldwin gets fired.
I would need to know who produced the segment. Was it an editor? Was it a producer? Did he know the full thing of what you said?
Even if it's then he should be on the air tomorrow apologizing to everybody.
If that's true.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, and also, look, when you are hosting a show, you host every night. Alan and I have hosted programs on the Fox News channel. As the host, you have a responsibility to know what you're putting on the air.
And the other one, Finney, oh, hey, all right, you're never going to and bang, there's the picture. All right? No. How stupid are they? I'd fire them just because they're stupid.
But I mean, to leverage, and this is the bigger point, to leverage the death of Nelson Mandela, which should be covered on its own merits, right?
To attack.
Yeah, you can be attacked without Mandela.
To attack Fox News channel.
So Combs is actually...
You don't need Mandela to attack you.
This could be a first.
Yeah.
Combs actually agreeing with Crowley and me.
No, I'm just saying you can be attacked with Mandela, not even in the
I think you might be piling on to him now. I think, you know, but look, this guy and people know who watched The Factor over the years. I gave him a chance. I did. I brought him on.
To dinner together.
I said, look, all the Tawana Brawley stuff you did, all the sweatsuit stuff, all the stuff you did in Harlem when a guy was killed. You know, maybe you changed. Maybe you got mature. Maybe things changed. And I try to, you know, and then the weasel goes over there and just,
But he chronically gets away with it, and others chronically get away with it.
You know what I'm going to do tomorrow? I'm going to bring on Kurtz and Goldberg together to discuss why NBC employs this man. That's what I'm going to do tomorrow.
Well, look, it may be that they're trying to get to their black base, and they think he's appealing to them. Listen, I don't know.
You see his ratings lately? Have you seen his ratings?
I'm not running the show over there. I'm just saying that may be part of the explanation.
I mean, there is no explanation. All right, Monica Combs. Directly ahead, Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann.